So, before we get into this next video, I just think it would be in everyone's benefit if we all just looked at this picture of a Care Bear for a little while. Oh, look at him. Look at him. Look at his wee paws. Look at his wee paws. Look at his belly. I bet he smells great. I bet he smells like strawberries and joy. Oh, look at his wee face. In fact, here's a baby elephant as well. Look at the baby elephant. Oh, look at the wee baby elephant. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. How long's that been? What's the rules for YouTube now? Alright, what is it? 30 seconds? The 120 Days of Sodom is what we're going to be talking about today. This is part 2 of my short list for the most depressing, the most disturbing, the most depraved, the most demented, the most violent, the most upsetting pieces of fiction ever written. I will put a link in the description to the first video. This is part 2. The first one we spoke about, like, Blood Meridian and American Psycho, and we got the short list going. But I wanted to I don't know, just meditate on this one particular book for a video, which is, it may well be the one. Do you know what I mean? It may well be the one. I will talk about more after this video, but today I want to talk about... Oh, a little disclaimer, by the way, there's going to be a lot of horrifying things discussed in this video. The most horrifying thing will probably be my pronunciation of some of the names, so you're going to have to bear with me. The 120 Days of Sodom, or The School of Libertinage, by Donatien Alphonse Francois Marquis de Sade, aka thankfully known as the Marquis de Sade, which is all we will be calling him from now on, because I might fuck pronouncing that name again. The 120 Days of Sodom was written in 1785. It was written while the Marquis de Sade... If you haven't heard of the Marquis de Sade, by the way, he was a nobleman, and a French nobleman back in the 1700s, and what can we say about him? He just loved life. He had a love of life that is hard to put into what... He was a hedonist or a hedonist, however you want to describe it. The word sadism is derived from his name, so if that should tell you all you need to know. He was all about his own pleasure, and he was all about the chasing of your own pleasure, for your own gratification is the most important, and I think it has to be said, sexual gratification is the most important thing in the world, and nothing and no one should stand in your way in pursuit of the highest forms of pleasure and sexual gratification. Anyway, he was, as you can imagine, very, very popular back in the day for these opinions. He was imprisoned in the Bastille, the French prison, and while he was there, he started writing this manuscript, the 120 Days of Sodom. In secret, he started writing it in the prison. He wrote it on toilet paper, actually, the same way that the Tooth Fairy writes to Hannibal Lecter. He wrote the manuscript on toilet paper, and he wrote the first couple of parts pretty detailed. There's 4 parts to the book. The first 2 parts he wrote in a very detailed manner. The second 2 were just kind of notes. He never got round to them, so there's a lot of like contradictions and plot holes and things that he hadn't reconciled yet. He never got a chance to do it. Obviously, the prison was stormed during the French Revolution, the 1789, I want to say. Google that, because that might be wrong, but I think 1789. The Marquis de Sade, after the prison was stormed, he believed that his manuscript had taken the journey of toilet paper the world over and had been lost forever. It wasn't lost, however. It was recovered and finally published in 1904, at which point it was instantly banned in every country that spoke English, as well as in its native France. It was banned everywhere. Just people had no time for it. They took one look at like the first few pages and thought, fuck this, and put it away and forgot about it for a few years, until, guess when? The 1960s was when it resurfaced and people started looking at it again and thinking this might actually be worth looking at a bit deeper and studying. And now it's a Penguin book. Just FYI, now it's a Penguin book. So the novel follows 4 wealthy libertines, basically 4 men which represent each arm of the central power in France. So there is the Duc de Blanguis. I'm just going to say it in Scottish. The Duc de Blangus, right? You happy? The Duc de Blangus. the Duc de Blanguis, whatever. He represents the nobility. You've got the bishop. He represents the clergy, obviously. You have the Presidente de Courval, who represents the legal system. And then you have the Dusset. He represents high finance. So these 4 guys basically have got it into their heads that they're going to lock themselves away in this huge chateau on top of a mountain, and they're going to bring some people with them. First and foremost, their own daughters, who they have married off to each other. They treat their own daughters very badly. I'm laughing. It's a defense mechanism. I'm probably going to laugh while I'm describing a lot of this. It's a defense mechanism. They treat their daughters very badly. Their plan is to go away, and for 4 months in this chateau, they will live a life of the highest level of debauchery imaginable. They're going to do whatever they have to each other. In fact, I should say they're going to take some people with them. They've brought 8 young men with them who have been chosen for a very particular reason, which I will leave up to your imagination. They have assets. They have a large asset that they could bring that's going to be useful at this chateau. So there's the 8 young male accomplices. There are the 4 daughters of the elites. Then there's going to be a bunch of young girls and boys, and I say young, specifically aged between 12 and 15. So exclusively minors. Wait, not minors. Minors, to steal a Louis C.K. joke. 12 to 15 years old. Obviously they have help that they're taking along with them as well. Cooks and servants and serfs, and do you know what I mean? And as well as all these people, there are 4 older women who, what shall I say, they are ladies of the night, who have had long, varied careers working as ladies of the night. So, and they're going to have a debaucherous 4 months in this chateau, which is going to be described in as much detail as the Marquis de Sade was able to describe before his home was stormed. Over the 4 months, basically, these 4 women are going to act as a storyteller. So each night, one of these 4 old ladies of the night is going to recount 5 stories, which are, basically sex stories that they have engaged in during their careers. So over the entirety of their time there's going to be like 600. Do the math. Do you know what I mean? There's 5 a day, so there's going to be like 600 depraved sexual stories are going to be recounted to these people. A large majority of them underage, children, basically. These stories that the old women tell will entice the libertines, the 4 libertines, basically into engaging in the act that they have been just told about. Do you know what I mean? The 4, as I said before, there's 4 parts to the story. There's the introduction, which tells you how everything's going to be presented, and then part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. So after the introduction, there is part 1. Each part is going to be a month as well, basically. Part 1 would be November, Part 2 December, Part 3 January, so on and so on. And each month, the stories that these the old whores, let's call them what they are, 4 old whores, the story that these 4 old prostitutes are going to tell will get more and more depraved as each month goes on. So, to give you an idea, Part 1 is the nice gentle month. That's where, you know, the nice, just dip your toes in the water. That's going to be like, I mean, still children involved. I'm sorry. There's really no other way of getting around this, of the treatment of children. It's rough. It really is rough going. So even Part 1, which is the soft sexual fetishes, the small sexual fetishes, Jesus Christ. So obviously November and December were the months that the Marquis de Sade was able to write in detail. I'm just dancing around it. So Part 1 is going to involve drinking of things, bodily fluids, the eating of bodily fluids, again, children, things involving children, and things involving corpses. You can imagine, I say things, whenever I say things, know exactly what I mean when I say things involving, you know, things involving things. So yeah, dead bodies, bodily fluids, children, these are all the soft entry points into the story. The Part 2 will be a bit more aggressive. So there's going to be family relations, incest, I think is the term for it. Just dancing around all these terms. There's going to be like sort of flagellation, self-harm, and there's actually a fair amount of time spent to like during religious, so blasphemy, basically. There's going to be a lot of like blasphemous and sacrilegious acts in Part 2, which at the time, obviously, very, 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 very seriously. Apparently more seriously than the treatment of children, which is in Part 1, the softer ones. So the Part 2 is more a lot of sort of anti-religion chat in Part 2. Part 3 is when we start to get into the less detailed notes that the Marquis de Sade wrote. Part 3 is going to be basically what you would regard as criminal acts. Part 1 and Part 2, apart from the children, take everything involving children out of this for a minute. I know that's hard, but take everything involving children out. And Part 1 and Part 2 are, for the most part, like, in the sanctity of your own home. Feel free to engage in these acts. Do you know what I mean? It's not, doesn't float my boat, but bodily fluids, flagellation, sadomasochist, all these things, by all means, if that's what tickles your pickle, go ahead. Close your bedroom door, lock your front door primarily, close your bedroom door, and let the postman ring twice. But Part 3 goes into it becomes criminal, basically. It's kidnapping, torture, it's very, very, very young girls. We even get into like guys who get off on selling their own children out to other wealthy guys, and that's like a kick for them. It's like, just imagine, I'm getting into the details, I'm going to stop actually, because just imagine every kind of demented fetish that you could imaginable, and it is in some way touched on in this book. That is basically what this book is to make you think about things that I guess you already knew in your heart of hearts. If you're like me, if you're a philosophical pessimist such as myself. So I guess if you're in any way inclined that way, you kind of already know that human beings do all of these things to each other, because, you know, bad people will do the worst that they can possibly do. But you don't want to think about it. You know what I mean? I guess I knew that people were being treated this way and that these things were possible in the human condition. The Marquis de Sade, however, makes you confront them. He puts them right in front of you and says, yeah, this is what people like to do. Anyway, digression. Part 4 is straight up murder, basically. Part 4 was not written at all. It's mostly notes, so it's not actually been written. It's going to involve the murder of, again, primarily children, but it's going to be like, again, the way every kind of sexual depravity that you can imagine for the first 3 parts is going to be murder in the 4th part. So every way that you can imagine a young boy or girl, man or woman, being tortured and then, you know, ended is going to be mentioned in this last part. It will also conclude with, basically, so during all of these stories, the Libertines have been acting out all these things on the kids and all that, and there's been some physical, you know, I think 1 or 2 of them, it may have been, am I misremembering? I don't think any of them actually die. Any of them are actually murdered. Maybe 1 gets murdered before the end. But part 4, like it's a free-for-all. So one of the, so part of the notes that the Marquis de Sade wrote was detailing who would be murdered, who would survive. I think, and rather than who's murdered, I think I'll tell you who survived. So they spare 12 people, basically, and they murder the rest. Everyone else is killed. The 4 storytellers, the ladies of the night, who have been providing the verbal entertainment for the past 4 months, they are all spared. 4 of the well-endowed young men who have been brought along to help are spared. 3 cooks, because yeah, why not? What did the cooks do? They just helped. Why kill the help? They didn't know what they were involved. They weren't involved. Anyway, I digress. And one of the young girls is spared. Were then sort of treated to very detailed description of how these characters are killed. And yeah, that's it. Basically that's it. Yeah, that it was fun. So it was, like I say, it was an incomplete novel. It was published in 1904. It is really, 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 really rough going. It was adapted into a film. I've tried to be as vague as possible. I know I've spoke about it. I know we've meditated on this book for a while now. So I'll draw it to a conclusion. I've tried to be as vague as possible. As I've said in the previous video, I really don't want to spoil any of like the main plots or any of the, I guess, revelations of the stories, but there really is no other way around this book other than to describe it the way I have, and believe it or not, I haven't really given much of the plot away. As if you are enticed to read this book, it's out there. I guess I would recommend it. As with any of with this style of fiction, it's hard to recommend these books unless, of course, you know you're talking to someone that is on the same journey as you, has fallen down the same rabbit hole as you have, in which case then, yeah, the 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade. All things considered, I think it is probably the most distressing work of fiction I've ever read. Just because it is really, it's like an endurance test. It really is like an endurance test. It's just to see if you can do it. Like I said, these things that are presented in this book are things that you will know are possible for human beings to do to each other. But you don't want to read about it, but you don't want to be confronted with it, like, in your face. So yeah, that's it. The 120 Days of Sodom. Go get traumatized. But yeah, I'm done.
And you, sir, are you waiting to receive my limp penis? How dare get your hands off me. Ta-ta and farewell.
So I guess get him in the car.